Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, your host, and above me here on the screen is Joe Clark, as always, my co-host here. And it is a very special episode because we are finally out of speculation season and into actual hard reporting, actual things to talk about, much more interesting for us and for you all listening. And so, Joe, how has the last couple of days been? Report day yesterday and today the first practice. Are you enjoying the news coming in?
Yeah, I mean it's busy, but I'm glad there's actually, something to write about every now and then. We're not scrubbing through the 33rd team for one of their really shitty lists that makes no sense. So actually getting some content, hearing from players, coaches, it's been good. Actually getting some real football, so it's been fun.
I agree. And obviously, our Alex Kazora here at Steelers Depot attends camp. And so he has his training camp diary that he does every day of practice that's open to the public. And lots of good content there. So if you guys haven't yet, I'm sure a lot of you have, but definitely go check that out. He's got very detailed notes right down to, how many receptions each guy got and everything like that. And he'll tally those up as the practices go along. But our first topic of the day that we're going to dive into is just kind of everything up to this point. So, report day yesterday, first day of practice today. Some of the big storylines. Joe, do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one, at least, early on in the day, was that Russell Wilson didn't practice. I mean, last night Mike Tomlin said the reps are going to be divided very carefully between Wilson and Fields. And, for the first day of practice for Wilson not to practice, everybody's like, what's going on? Is it a rest day? My original theory was maybe just he's gonna have Thursday rest days and they don't want to throw off the routine. So today's gonna be a rest day. But apparently he woke up, tweaked his calf, wanted to practice. Mike Tomlin, coaching staff said no, not gonna risk it. I mean, that makes sense. He's a 35-year-old quarterback, but you're not gonna risk, in injury on the first day of camp if he's the guy that might be their starter. But he was around the team, he was wearing a baseball hat and his uniform and not full uniform, just a jersey, um just kind of being a leader. That's what guys said. He was around, he was motivating, being a leader. We'll see if he's back. Tomlin characterized the injury as day to day, so not really a big concern. And Wilson was throwing off to practice, but I think that's probably, that was definitely one of the biggest stories. And then Justin Fields got his opportunity. And seemingly, from what Alex said, had a pretty good day, made some nice throws. Obviously, the one Van Jefferson down the sideline, that's one of those throws that it's really one of those a practice throw. Cornerback went down. It's a wide open receiver, but it was a beautifully thrown ball. He hit Jefferson in stride for a touchdown. That's what you like to see. And so Fields looked pretty good, and it's good, to see him get a bigger opportunity. And I think that's kind of maybe a blessing in disguise that we can see a little bit more of Fields here in this setting. I still think Wilson's going to win the job, but for future evaluation, I think it's important to see what you have in Fields. And a full day early in practice of him getting first team reps, I think is pretty interesting and pretty good for the evaluation process.
Yeah, and cue up the national media headlines of, this is the beginning of Justin Fields winning the competition or whatever. I've already seen some of that floating around. And I mean, certainly, like, it's better than if he hadn't gotten the reps, and, maybe they're working on some of these things, like if they do plan on having a specialized package for Fields, this would be a good time to kind of get that out of the way, or at least some of that out of the way. And I know that from Alex's reports and what we kind of saw floating around online, it seems like there was a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, a lot of multiple tight ends, a lot of fullback stuff. Pat Fryermuth was the leading kind of receiver of the day, even over a guy like George Pickens. It seemed like Fryermuth was targeted early and often, and so maybe this is the kind of stuff that we would see with Fields. It makes sense, him being a mobile quarterback, to have these kind of heavy packages for him where he could either run or get the tight ends involved or do some play action stuff. And yeah, I mean, Fields, we knew that he was a good deep ball passer, and really so is Russell Wilson. And so it's was expected, but it is still nice to see the stuff that we expected from him right off the rip there. And so another thing that I wanted to talk about from training camp is the offensive line. Everything pretty much proceeded as it was at the spring practices, more or less. Dan Moore Jr. started out on the left side, and Broderick Jones remaining on the right side for now. And I think the second team, you had guys like Troy Fautanu, and I think Zach Frazier was running with the second team. And so that means Nate Herbig was running as the first team center. And so not a huge surprise there. I mean, they like to have these rookies earn their spot, their starting role. And I know particularly like Broderick Jones today even said in one of the post-practice interviews, he said he's glad that he didn't have to start right away as a rookie. He's glad he had to wait until week, what was it, 9 or 10 or something to jump into the starting lineup. Which game was that? Was it the Titans that he jumped in?
Or he started, I think, week 5 because Dan Moore went down at left tackle, but then he didn't become a full-time starter until week 9 against the Titans.
Titans, right. Yeah, he jumped in there halfway through the Jaguars game after Chuks Okorafor. But anyway, yeah, he said that was valuable experience for him, basically, to ride the Pines as a backup and kind of get his NFL footing. Now, I know that Mike Tomlin yesterday in the opening, or the report day press conference that he did, he also spoke about these offensive linemen like Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier being older than, maybe some rookies of the past. And so their age maybe leading to them being more ready than some of these other guys. And this is also stuff that we've spoken about pretty much since they were drafted. Troy Fautanu has way more college starts and experience than Broderick Jones did coming in. Zach Frazier was one of the most experienced centers. I think he might have been the most experienced center coming out of this draft class in terms of how many starts he had at that position in college. And so, yeah, this is something that you could see these guys definitely on track to start week 1, but it is no surprise that they are starting out as the backup. And it was nice to see, I don't know if you saw that, but Broderick Jones getting a little post-practice work in with Troy Fautanu. It looked like he was kind of coaching him up on something. You can't hear what he was saying, but there was about a 30-second clip that was floating around there. I think Mike DeFabo or one of those guys posted it, and it was just him giving him some instruction, and then they ran through a rep together. And I think back to last year, at the end of last season, Mike Tomlin kind of noted that Broderick Jones is stepping into a leadership role on the offensive line, and he kind of compared him to a guy like Marquise Pouncey that filled that role for many years. And so it's good to see, even as a young guy himself who's still getting his own NFL footing, he still has to move back to left tackle. He's still investing in these rookie guys. And so I thought that was awesome to see.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, Jones is a guy that did the same thing Fautanu did. He was pretty much a full-time left tackle in college, and he switched to the right side, pretty early into his and I mean, training camp last year into his rookie season, that's where he got the most of his reps. So he kind of, Fautanu said yesterday, it's difficult. He's like, it's just the footwork, so it should be easy, but it's a lot more difficult than you think because it's muscle memory and you play. In Fautanu's case, it was over 2,000 snaps on the left side. It's like he played a ton on the left side. Broderick Jones had less, but it's still the muscle memory and you're playing left tackle. The footwork's different. So it is difficult to switch over. So it is nice to see a guy that had to make, that same switch last year, probably can coach him through it a little bit better than most people can. He was like, hey, this is kind of maybe what worked for me. This is what maybe something you should work on. Really not a surprise that Fautanu and Frazier were on the second team. I think come the season, at least Frazier, I would be shocked if Frazier didn't start, although he did have a bad snap today, which is worth noting. Offense was obviously in flux and didn't prepare for Russell Wilson not practicing, but he did have a bad snap to Kyle Allen today. But I think Frazier's definitely going to start week 1. Fautanu, we'll see. I think he will. I would say there's probably a 60% chance he starts week 1, but I'm not as confident as him starting as Frazier, just because the difficulty switching to the right side. We don't know if he can really prove that he's a starting caliber right tackle. And so that'll be interesting to see, because if he doesn't start week 1 at right tackle, then I think we're going to have, the offense, at least the tackle alignment we had today, where you have Broderick Jones back on the right side and you have Dan Moore on the left side. That would probably be a letdown given you invested a first-round pick in Fautanu. It seems like the team wants to move Broderick Jones back to the left side, but it's really going to be up to if Fautanu can prove that he's going to start on on the red side. But obviously, yeah, Broderick Jones taking on that leadership role is huge. Kind of very similar situation to Fautanu last year. So glad to see him helping out and, taking on the, yeah, as a, second year guy. It's tough to really step into a leadership role, but he's seemingly doing so, which is really great to see.
Yeah, I think in the past, I mean, we saw with Kenny Pickett and Najee Harris, like some of these guys that they thrust into these leadership roles early on, and maybe they weren't fully ready for it or whatever the case might have been, but the leadership just didn't seem to be up to par, particularly last year on the offensive side of the football for the Steelers. And so having these young guys step into that role is really, really encouraging. Uh, we kind of skipped over this, but the Steelers did add 3 players, well, 2 to the physically unable to perform list and 1 to the non-football injury list. The 2 on the PUP are Cole Holcomb and Dean Lowry. So Holcomb was kind of expected. I think there was some optimism that maybe he'd be ready for the first practice, but Tomlin had said as much about a month ago, and so him ending up there is not a huge surprise, not a big concern for now. It seemed like he was still trending in the right direction, so we'll see what comes of that. But Dean Lowry, that one's a little bit interesting. I think it was described as a soft tissue thing by somebody. So, we don't have a ton of information there at the moment, but we'll see how that progresses. Obviously, if that ends up being a longer term thing, that is kind of an issue because the defensive line is lacking in depth, definitely, and he was kind of the solution to that lack of depth. So if they lose him for any period of time, that's not great. And then the big one that was kind of like a little bit unfortunate was kick returner Cordero Patterson on the non-football injury list. Mike Tomlin, I believe he said he tweaked his hamstring or something like that when he was practicing away from the team. And I I wrote a post about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago because Cordero Patterson, after I think it was one of the mini camp practices or something, he said, and I praise him for his honesty, but he said, my body's about a 2 out of 10 right now. He said, by the time training camp starts, it'll be a 7. By the time training camp's over, it'll be and he basically is saying, this isn't a worry. I do this every year. He really values kind of the downtime in his schedule and kind of letting his body take a break, which I think there is something to be said about that. But at 33 years old, you're just a month out from training camp and you're admitting that your body's a 2 out of 10. And then you show up to camp on the non-football injury list with a hamstring. To me, that's a little concerning.
Yeah, no, and going back to Lowry, I think he ended last season with a pectoral injury, so it's probably my guess it was that's why he's on PUP is it's related to that. But with Patterson, yeah, so the thing is he said his body's at a 2 out of 10 and he does it. But if you look at last season, his workload was, significantly less than it has been in prior seasons. So in 2021 for Atlanta, he had 205 touches. 2022, he had 165. Last year, he just had 59 offensive touches. Obviously, he still had a special teams role, but I mean, that's a pretty big decrease in touches for you to kind of go through your same offseason routine and expect everything to be the same. So he's not on the field as much. He's not working his muscles as much, which, yeah, that's fine. But then you think in the offseason, you kind of adjust and you adapt and you ramp that up. And it doesn't seem like Patterson did that. I mean, obviously, you can't fault the guy for getting hurt, but when the comments are, his body was a 2 out of 10, and then all of a sudden he suffers a hamstring injury working out, you have to question it a little bit. And so Patterson, I think, has become a little bit of a worry, at least for me. He didn't seem all that enthused about the new kickoff rules, and the team was testing him with wonky kicks that he's probably going to see in a kickoff setting, like low line drives. And he was a little like, oh, I'm a little skeptical. Like I'm not. I forget exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of that. He had he had mixed feelings about the new rule. Given that, and now all of a sudden that he's now hurt, how much are we going to see him contribute for the Steelers this season? So we're not going to see him early in camp. Who knows how severe the hamstring injury is? So not really optimistic about Cordero Patterson this season. It was a signing that looked really good, and I was really excited about it initially, but currently it's not one that I'm feeling good about.
Yeah, I think we've seen some of these soft tissue stuff can linger. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's pretty minor, and this is just can't really speculate on that because we don't have all the information. But yeah, I just remember when I posted that article, everyone in the comments were pretty, it's not a big deal. And I will say, obviously, he has experience with Arthur Smith. It seems like this has kind of been his offseason routine, at least for the last several seasons, if not his whole career. So, Arthur Smith would have known that about him, I would assume. And so this isn't probably something that caught them off guard in terms of his body preparation, but yeah, it is a little bit concerning. And then, they did invest how much money in him per season? It was like 3 or 4 million a year. Or
3 mil, yeah. I think he got 2 for 6 mil.
So, I mean, not the greatest, and we'll just have to wait and see when he becomes available to the team. But it will hurt their ability to drill this stuff with him at training camp, depending on how long he's out. So that's a little bit of a concern to me. They want to be as ready as possible for those new rules because I'm sure NFL teams are going to have all kinds of tricks up their sleeve when it comes to unveiling that new rule this season. So moving on to our second topic here, Omar Khan did speak to the media today, held a press conference after practice, and spoke about a wide range of topics. We're going to touch on a few of them here today. They did ask him about the wide receiver room. He had already kind of been asked about this in the past and kind of expressed basically the same thing he expressed today, which is that he's happy with the group they have. He's excited about the different skill sets they have and, them working with quarterbacks like Russell Wilson and Justin Fields and what that can do for the room. And, I totally get all that. He was also asked about the possibility of trading for somebody, which has been one of the big offseason storylines. He said something along the lines of, there are no conversations happening right now, though, with 32 general managers around the league, there are always conversations taking place. So on one hand, he's saying there's no active conversations, but he's also saying, there's always conversations, which I thought was kind of funny. And then he did say, obviously, they created that cap space before the draft with Alex Highsmith restructuring his contract. He was asked about that, and he said, if a trade opportunity comes, we do have the flexibility to, make that happen. And so I think we're kind of in the same place with that whole situation that we have been. It's just a wait and see. The Steelers are probably evaluating what they have, and they're still probably evaluating who's available and not available around the league. I mean, just today, Cortland Sutton signed a restructured contract with the Denver Broncos, most likely eliminating him from any possible trade scenario. I mean, it wasn't a huge restructuring, so it doesn't necessarily contractually bar them, but he got what he wanted from the Broncos in terms of his salary being in the 15 to 16 million range, which was reportedly what he was after. And so he's probably staying put in Denver, and, your trade targets are starting to dwindle. I mean, Ayuk's still out there. Some of these other guys are still out there, but doesn't seem like Omar Khan has any sense of urgency to make that happen, despite what fans might be clamoring for.
Yeah, I mean, right now I think your really only trade target, and that I'll say realistically, even though I don't really think this is one that's going to happen, is Ayuk. I mean, if you're looking for like a real, to steal Brent McFadden's words, not a erroneous report, a real significant playmaker, it would really just be Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I don't really know who else other. I don't think DK Metcalf's going anywhere. Obviously, Tyler Lockett signed his restructured deal. He's not going anywhere. So it's just Ayuk, and it really doesn't seem like Ayuk's going anywhere either. I mean, even if he does, I still think Washington would be the number one destination ahead of Pittsburgh. I think they'd probably be more willing to pony up, give him, a better offer, I think, than the Steelers probably would. They could probably throw in another receiver. Maybe a Terry McLaurin could be a part of that trade. But so yeah, the Steelers, I think. And I do think what the thing that this receiver room has is they have a different mix of skill sets. You have a speed guy in Calvin Austin. You have Van Jefferson kind of work outside. He had the one good season with the Rams. Scotty Miller is another speed guy. But Calvin Austin could be more of a slot. Scotty Miller can be more of an outside speed guy. So it's interesting, the mix of skill sets, and that they still have Pickens, who can be the true number one. You have Freiermuth, who was good his first 2 seasons, got peppered with targets today. I think he's really due for the step up, and I think the prevailing sentiment is he's really going to be the number 2 receiver. He'll be the number 2 pass catcher in the offense. So I think the receiver room now, yes, it could stand to improve, but
I've come around on the idea that it's not as bad as, we might have thought in April or the beginning of May. Like there's enough to work with given how Arthur Smith has run his offense that it could be productive with Russell Wilson. And, he did a good job getting all those guys and Justin Fields together, and they all kind of built a rapport ahead of training camp too. So I think that's all going to help. It's all going to work itself out. I mean, and Russell Wilson yesterday was Mr. like, oh, this guy's really good at this. This guy's really good at that. He's hyping everybody up. I mean, not just who he is. He's kind of a corny dude, but it's good leadership. Like, hey, you kind of compliment everybody. Although his Van Jefferson comment was a little bit funny, and I they mentioned it on 93.7 The Fan yesterday. I did agree. It was Calvin Austin really stepped up. He's been great. Van Jefferson, he's a really diligent receiver. It's like, yeah, I mean it can be good. Like, he's really invested in his craft and he studies and he works, but it was just funny that was the word he used to describe him. And it seems, I mean, Van Jefferson started today as the number one outside guy next to I think it was Calvin Austin in the slot and Pickens Jefferson on the outside. So I mean, it seems like he's kind of got an inside track to play a bigger role. But yeah, I just don't really see the need right now for them to add a receiver. If they added Ayuka, hey, great. I'd be all for it. I think Brandon Ayuk's a great player. But then you have to pay him. You have to obviously give up draft assets to get trade for him. And I just don't think, Omar Khan's super motivated to do that, given that if the Steelers shit for Brandon Ayuk, are they, a real Super Bowl contender right now? And it improves their odds, but I don't know if you're putting them up against, the Chiefs or any of the 40, even the 49ers still, yeah, any of those teams. So right now it's probably not something that they're looking to do. And that's totally okay. And I think they can make this room work and still make the playoffs and maybe be a little bit more of a threat than we think.
Yeah, I think certainly today, seeing how, Pat Fryermuth really shined at practice, that will go a long way towards alleviating any wide receiver 2 concerns if he really is that guy who, I think the last couple of seasons everybody's thought he could be that guy, but for one reason or another, whether it was the offense just being inept or him getting injured, it hasn't happened. And, this year could be the year. And if that's the case, then yeah, this offense really has pretty much everything it needs if that's the case. But obviously, if he were to get injured, big issues and all like that. But another thing that Khan talked about that was pretty interesting, I thought, was addressing the Cam Heyward contract situation. What was his exact quote there? He essentially said that he would like to have Heyward back for... he thinks Heyward has years left in him, years ahead of him still in football, and that they would like to have him back. And he's not going to talk about the specifics of any negotiation or anything like that, obviously, but it seems like there's a will on both sides. The Steelers want him. Heyward wants to be back. Heyward just reiterated that today. So do you think that given what Khan said, is there a better chance, you think, now that something does get done?
I've always been of the mind that there's a pretty good chance something gets done. I think Khan's comments, I think it's pretty telling when he said, I expect him to be here for years to come. I think that's pretty telling that they expect something to happen. But I don't necessarily know that him saying that is going to be any precursor to the deal. I mean, Cam's a fan favorite. He's a guy that he's a captain. He's a defensive captain. He's an emotional leader in the locker room. It would be a tough look if Khan kind of danced around the question about Heyward staying. So I think you did a good job giving a pretty solid answer. I expect him to be here for years to come. I still think the two sides kind of have to agree, because I think Cam's valuing himself as a top 7, top 5 interior defensive lineman in the league. I think the Steelers probably want to see a little bit more of him coming off the injury. And honestly, the fact that he's not holding in, I think does probably increase the odds of him getting a contract, because the team's going to see him work, full bore without full bore. He's not holding in. He'll go up against Pats come on next week. He'll be playing post injury. He'll going full go in practice. Even if, the coaching staff does hold him out sometimes, that's fine, because they'll still see him most of the time against, the first team offensive line, and see if he can still really be the anchor of that defensive line. So yeah, I think before camp, something's going to get done. And I think, his comments probably don't increase the odds that I think something's going to get done, but it is telling that he was so adamant that he thinks Heyward's going to stick around in Pittsburgh. So I think I think we're going to see 2 extensions during camp. I think we're going to see Freiermuth, and that'll get done. I mean, I could see, within the next week. And I think we'll see Heyward at least before camp breaks, or at least before week 1. Maybe not before camp breaks, because that's like August 15th. But before week 1, I think we'll see a Heyward extension. So I would be surprised, I think, at this point if that didn't happen.
Yeah, given the data of what Omar Khan said, we've talked about it on the show. I've been kind of on the just wait until next off season because why not train, and I still think that's a possibility because there really is nothing to gain from giving him the contract now. He's not going to be some malcontent. He's the captain of the team and all that, but yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And to your point, he didn't hold in. Najee Harris didn't hold in. He's practicing today, so there was no hold-ins. Pat Freiermuth, obviously, nobody ever really talked about him being a hold-in, but he is, one of these guys that's due for a contract. So no hold-ins, which is very encouraging to see. I think that pretty much sums up Omar Khan's comments. He did say something about Patrick Peterson's return and, whatever. I think it was just kind of a passing comment because he was asked the question. It's kind of the same stance he's taken, which is, we're always evaluating all options, that kind of thing. So we'll see. It was interesting today, Deshaun Elliott taking some slot snaps. I think Beanie Bishop Jr. was taking the first team slot reps over a guy like Josiah Scott, who is a veteran. So that is interesting to see as well. You would kind of think, you look at all the other positions, they're giving the veteran the first crack, and that's not the case here in the slot competition. So is that speaking to how much they really do like Beanie Bishop Jr.? They've talked about that, and so that'll be definitely something to track along. But moving on to our third topic, and we will make this one quick, but it is rather interesting, and it probably is going to be the story of the first couple of days of camp at this point. But George Pickens got into a somewhat of a kind of spat with his wide receiver coach, Zach Azzanni. Ray Fittipaldo reported this on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette in one of his training camp recaps, and basically said, I think Azzanni was trying to, correct. He wasn't pleased with Pickens, the way he completed his assignment. He was just trying to coach him up, as coaches do. And apparently Pickens did not enjoy whatever was said to him. And the quote was he was visibly upset. Other receivers reportedly tried to talk to him or console him or whatever it was. And, he was just not having it. He was upset. Joe, is this concerning to you?
Honestly, yeah, I think it is a little bit concerning because they brought in Azzanni to be a hard ass, and the reports throughout the offseason where he's not taking it easy on Pickens, but he's super high on Pickens too. He can see Pickens' talent. He said during it was OTs or minicamp, he's like, Ray Charles can see how talented this guy is. He wants to get the most out of him. And Pickens, the part of the reason the Steelers traded Deontay Johnson was he was immature, was rubbing off on Pickens, and Pickens did have, some attitude, maturity issues coming out. So I was hopeful this offseason that, hey, maybe he's just competitive and Azzanni's going to bring out, he's going to be hard on him, but it's going to bring out, the competitive side of Pickens, the side that wants to be the best he can be. But correcting a rep and Pickens throws a fit, from all accounts, that's what happened, is Pickens got upset from Azzanni correcting him and got in his face and was upset about it. Like, come on, dude. Like, yes, Pickens is a good receiver, but he's not like so good that he can't, be coached or be above reproach. And you'd think he would see, and from what everybody said, is Azzanni's, he's a real like drill sergeant type of coach. He's somebody who's gonna get on you. He's not gonna let anything slide. Calvin Austin said it a bunch this offseason. And like, you're George Pickens in the first day of training camp, and he goes and tries to correct something, and you throw a fit. Like, I hate that. I really hate that from Pickens' side. And I just hope that he's gonna, learn and develop and grow and try to figure out how to take some of this harder coaching. Because if the first day of camp, if Azzanni tries to correct something and he throws a fit, then this is probably going to be his last season in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and this was probably inevitable. Just given the nature of how Zach Azzanni operates and just kind of what we've seen from George Pickens in his couple seasons with the team. You think back to the game he had against the Atlanta Falcons. He was playing in front of his hometown crowd. He only had one reception, and he was kind of pouting, and you could just tell he was visibly upset, and he's kind of been labeled as somebody with maybe some maturity issues. And so when you bring in a guy like Azzanni, this was probably inevitable. So now it's just a matter of, okay, there's two ways this could go. Pickens could take to the coaching and understand, and, maybe this will eventually get through to him. Or this is just going to be an issue. Like, this might just continue to be an issue. And then at that point, what do you do? The Hard Knocks cameras are going to be in the locker room and on the field with them for the final 6 weeks. And it's not going to be a good look if you've got Azzanni and Pickens just going at it. It'll certainly be good television, but in terms of optics for the Pittsburgh Steelers, not great. So I don't know if this is a sign of things to come or what it is, but it will be very interesting to watch this develop. I would guess there's going to be at least one more of these at training camp, and we'll see what happens from there. But that is everything that we have today. I did want to plug the phone number at the bottom of the screen. That's 412-254-3145. Again, that's 412-254-3145. If you have a question about training camp, anything Steelers related, fire away. We will answer your question on a future episode of the show. We could sure use some new questions from you guys. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We're going to have a ton of training camp content for you every day for the next 3 weeks straight. And so we sure hope you tune in to SteelersDepot.com, tune back into the Depot Dive, tune into the Terrible Podcast, which is pretty much happening daily during training camp. I know they had their, 35-minute episode go up today to recap the first day. So check that out. We definitely appreciate all of your guys' support. I'm Ross. That's Joe. We'll catch you next time.